So absolutely, Kat, thank you for recording the session. And I think that's important, point of clarification that absolutely we'll stop recording before the Q&A, because it's really important that you have an opportunity to ask whatever might come up for you. And you might have a thought before the training starts itself, I'm definitely going to ask about this, but from listening to me, you might ask something completely different. So just stay open if you can, and I know you will. It's great to be back chatting with the team. Can I just double check that you can hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All okay? Yeah, I take a thumbs up. Excellent. I am here in my voluntary capacity today with Breaking the Silence, and I'll tell you all about Breaking the Silence. My own business is Human Reasons, and that's that second logo that's there, humanreasons.com. And I spent all of my life in the whole area of working with people just like yourselves who have so much in common, either from a work perspective or from a voluntary point of view. In my company, we always talk about, I love the logo, the slogan we have, write your next chapter, write the next chapter in your life. So we'll anchor today on today's chapter. And today's chapter is very much about, obviously, the core training, which is Safe Talk. And I'm not delivering the actual Safe Talk training today. It's important to clarify that, but I'm going to tell you the key areas that are covered as a starter module for you. And then hopefully, again, in the coming months, we can run another Safe Talk actually on your premises, because we did have Safe Talk take place at the Metropole last year. It was last April, actually, so April 2019. So how much has changed in the intervening period. Before I get into the detail of today, I really want to thank Kat, who organises everything, I know. Kathleen, obviously, who leads the HR team, and the Trigon senior leadership team, who are very proactive in this whole area. And I'm the voice on behalf of my group. I'd like to thank them, Breaking the Silence, and I'm really privileged to chat on their behalf, and have done for 11 years now. So why are we here today? Why even bother? Why, it's always good to ask why bother, So we're here as a community, or as a village. I prefer to say, they say this whole thing of virtual community. I prefer VV, virtual village. I prefer the wording village. We're exploring the whole area of suicide prevention and mental health and well-being in the context of supporting our friends, our families, our colleagues, our customers. So there's lots of different, people within our dependents that we have in our lives, and so much synchronicity in terms of who we're interacting with. I want to add in, we are really here as well to think about ourselves, okay? So you might be here today because you just want some general awareness, but you might be on the call today because you're struggling. And I just want to say that everybody, for whatever reason, is really welcome, and to think about it in a multidimensional way in terms of how you really are, not how you say. We all say we're grand, I say grand about 10,000 times a day. But how are you really doing? So think about yourself as well, because self-care is just vital. And we throw it out there, they all say, oh, you put your own oxygen mask on first when the airplane goes down. And that is true, but we throw it out there very, very quickly. And it's a really serious business, looking after our own welfare, really, really important. So I just want you to keep that at the front of your awareness today. So that's why we're here today in a general kind of brushstroke. Why am I here today? As I said, I'm volunteering with Breaking the Silence for about 11 years now. I came back from living in Spain, in Madrid, and I was very, very fortunate to be asked by, members at the time to get involved. And like, I had never done much voluntary work before then, apart from stand with a bucket the odd time and think I was fantastic for doing so. And I had no idea what was really involved. And it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. In terms of me, in terms of suicide prevention and suicide, we lost a member of our family to suicide. I know lots of families have. My mum's first cousin, and that was horrendous, and horrendous circumstances. And I suppose myself, I support people all the time in terms of mental health. Like, I work in the whole area of HR and career services. So I'm either supporting a company, and mental health comes up all the time. Career services, somebody comes to me to get ready for an interview, and it's like, well, by the way, I have chronic anxiety. I know all about anxiety myself. I have very young memories of experiencing anxiety. I think I was about 6 years old, and I started panicking about the leads at the back of the television catching fire. And I don't think there's any other 6-year-olds in my friends group worrying about that at that stage back in 1986. So you can do the math on my age. So down to business, we're here very specifically now to talk about the key areas, and we'll transition into that in terms of what's covered in Safe Talk training. So I'm running through this now, and I'm aware of that. And then we will have a Q&A. So that's where the real work gets done, as I keep saying. And you can ask absolutely anything that you want to ask at that point in time. We'll be talking about Safe Talk. Breaking the Silence. Our Facebook page is Breaking the Silence Cove. I'd recommend liking it if you are on Facebook and sharing it with colleagues, from that perspective. But also, why are we even called Breaking the Silence? You can imagine, right? So again, we just throw it out there. BTS, that's, it says here on the screen, Avril from BTS, Breaking the Silence, because suicide and mental health problems and emotional problems thrive in silence. And silence is the most dangerous thing ever. Like, silence kills people. So does loneliness, by the way. So silence is very, very deadly. So that's why we're called literally Breaking the Silence. Now, it was kind of funny, and not to get into politics, but at one point in time we were looking to get our logo done, I'll tell you this. And we Googled Breaking the Silence, and we found some Israeli group, some paramilitary group called Breaking the Silence. They're like, no, that's not us. We're the dudes in Cork talking about suicide prevention, just a bit different. But we are about breaking the silence. We are about, talking, and Safe Talk is about talking, particularly about the stuff that's the hardest ever. We're brilliant at talking in Ireland, but do we talk about what we really need to talk about? That is the question, and we'll cover that, right? So Safe Talk itself is a world standard training module. It was developed by what we would call an SME, a subject matter expert in, as opposed to small medium enterprise, whatever that means, but a subject matter expert, an SME in suicide prevention in North America, called Living Works. Now, they are research specialists in suicide prevention, huge dominance of suicide in their locality, and as an output of that, then they're like, right, okay, we're going to get under the cover of this now, and we're going to really look into what causes suicide and how you can stop it. And stop it in most cases. You won't prevent every suicide, but you have a very good chance of preventing 9 out of 10 of them, I would say, in my experience, if you've got some training done. So Safe Talk is, the HSE, we deliver on behalf of the HSE as well, in partnership with them. They'll say it's a half-day workshop. It is indeed, and you can do it over 3.5 hours, but not shorter than that, really. And it is a world standard module, so it is accredited and it's certified. So from that perspective, then what's it doing? So it's literally like, it's like the ad years ago. I don't know if anybody remembers it. Ronseal, what it says on the tin. It does what it says in the tin. Safe talk. It makes it safe for somebody to talk, and to talk, as I said, about what's really going on for them. So what is their real experience, as opposed to I'm fine, I'm good, I'm grand. So what's really going on. So what that module will do with you is if you want to make some notes, I'd highly recommend it. So it'll talk you through the key, what we will call watch outs. What are you watching out for? So what are your watch outs? So like this, so it's like, what are you really watching out for with somebody, in terms of, that there might be a genuine concern in terms of their mental health and well-being, or that they could be seriously considering suicide. And there's a lot of the behavioural and the language signs are in typical day-to-day behaviour as well, so they can get quite diluted. But there's some of them that really do stand out, and I think you'll remember those. So it depends on the relationship you have with the person, obviously. Everything's about context. So have you just met the person? Have they just walked in the lobby of the hotel? Or is it somebody that you know for years? Is it somebody you meet once a week? So always thinking, okay, what's the context? And working in hospitality, you'll naturally have very strong relationship skills. So you will have a good handle of how somebody is generally, and how they generally sort of rock up, and how their general temperament is in terms of how you perceive it. So if you see something different to that, then you're going to be kind of, watching out for what might be different. So what are the telltale signs? And people do tell us when they're thinking of suicide. So for example, if somebody generally talks about everything in their conversation, but suddenly they start talking about death a lot. So talking about death and talking about it very often, or more often than somebody normally would, or talking about death excessively, is something very, very serious to be aware of. So somebody normally doesn't mention death unless somebody passes away and it's a natural conversation point, but suddenly they're talking about funerals, they're talking about, something to do with a funeral, they're talking about their funeral, they're talking about death in general, they're talking maybe about life after death, they're talking about a family who's had a loss. So again, it all comes from that baseline that you have of having a good, I suppose, understanding of the person on a general basis, and then something that's different. And talking about death a lot or excessively, or about their own death, is something to be very, very, very aware of. That's one of them, and that's a key one. There isn't too many of them, but that's a really, really fundamental one. The next one then is if somebody starts giving away possessions, but out of the norms. So I'm a person, I have to declutter regularly or I get completely disorganized. I just have to keep kind of clutter free because it just disorganizes my own processing in my brain. But if somebody starts, decluttering and like, I don't really mean decluttering, but giving away possessions, as I said. So if they basically unexpectedly show up at the door with their dog, for example, and let's say the dog's called Fred, can you please look after Fred for me? And it's like, well, what's that about? Or, giving away my great grandmother's necklace, and just totally out of context and for no reason, because the subtext is they're not going to be around because they have a plan to end their lives. So giving away possessions, but not doing it on a general basis, like my, random decluttering I do, giving away possessions out of context and unexpectedly and without a kind of a good reason. And you'll be watching the way the person's interacting with you as well. Like, as we know through Professor Meribane's work in the University of California, we do most of our communicating non-verbally. I think, only 7% of how we communicate is the actual words we use. So as human beings, as social engaging mammals, we're trained from a brain perspective to really watch out for those social cues in the face and to read those non-verbal signals on the face and also through the body language. So you know by someone says, oh, I'm fine. And they're not. Either their face is very serious or they've got their arms crossed. And again, they're behaving differently to what they'd normally behave as. So that's another one. So the first two that we've had so far, talking out of context about death, and the second one, giving away the possessions. And the third one, which is probably, it's probably the last one really at this point in time to be aware of. It's just any out of character, excessive behavior. So somebody who typically goes out one night a week and has a really good night and a really bad hangover the next day, but suddenly it's 7 nights a week, it's full on, it's extremely intense, it's not going to stop. Somebody who's, let's say, excessive behavior could be in terms of alcohol use, it could be in terms of drug use, and we all know people who take drugs for different reasons, prescribed and unsubscribed. So again, okay, maybe somebody can take something recreationally and they're fine, it could be cannabis and they're fine with their bit a week. But again, it becomes 7 nights a week and it's out of character and it's having an impact on them and it's different and it's out of character for them. Watching out for that. Even things like driving, like unsafe, reckless driving, kind of not caring. So basically what are they saying to you? They're saying, I don't care, I'm not going to be around anyway, I have a plan. So it's that stuff. So what we're doing is we're watching out for the watch outs, and the watch outs can be through the language they're using or their actual behavior. So really then if you're starting to get worried about somebody, you're going to naturally listen to them more anyway, just through your attention span's going to narrow in on them. And when you do narrow in on them, then really listen to what are they saying, so what types of language, it doesn't matter anyway. Sure, everything always goes wrong for me. And we can talk about that more in the Q&A from that perspective in terms of what you might say. So that's really just the overview in terms of what to watch out for. What's critical from a Safe Talk perspective is the whole model is a first aid model. So it's all about watching out, as I said, and then it'll equip you with how to ask the person what's going on and actually asking them, are they thinking of suicide? Because then fundamentally, it is a first aid model. The training will teach you then on how to connect that person with the next resource, because your job as a first aider, that's what you do. You're not a psychiatrist. You're not expected to be a psychologist, practicing counselor, any of those therapeutic professions. You're just expected to be more aware of how people are, ask them the question, and you'll be trained in how to do that. And then critically then link them into the next resource. And that can be, that next resource will come up naturally through how you discuss it with the person, depending on what they need. So for example, just to give you a practical example of what that you as a first aider could be connecting the person to, it could actually be quite critical. You could come across somebody, we did have an example last year of somebody who came across somebody on a bridge in Cork City. So something like that, you'd be ringing the Gardaí, you'd be ringing the emergency services, because that's happening right now in front of you. So whereas somebody's saying, I'm thinking of doing something to myself in the next couple of weeks, that's different. It's obviously still very serious, but it's not right here, right now, as Fat Boy Slim says. It's not right in front of you where you have to ring the emergency services. You literally can't take that person out of your vision, out of your range of vision, because you don't know what they're going to do. So you're ringing the Gardaí, an ambulance, the fire service, whatever it might be. Okay, so it is a first aid model. And as I said to you, the whole thing about the training is asking the question. And you will be trained on how to speak with the person in a way, as I keep saying, that makes it safe for them to talk. Safe talk. Because there's certain things that we say to our culture, and it's no different in any other culture, that actually they're language blockers, they prevent, their communication blockers, they prevent the person who really, really does want help to ask for help. You know, it's very much a standoffish scenario. You know, like, so for example, the training will talk to you about this again. Like, we'd have a thing in Ireland where we'd say, you're not thinking of doing anything silly, are you? That's the typical thing that we'd say. And actually, that's not one bit helpful for that person who's in crisis at that point in their lives. So I'm just moving on to wrap up this content from me, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So just wrapping up there, what I covered actually the fact that it is, you know, a world standard program. There's so much research behind it. It's highly recommended. But in terms of today, you will definitely get something from attending today in terms of the language signs I spoke about, the behaviors, talking about death out of context, giving away those possessions out of context, behavior that's out of context, etc. Really, really good use of your time to be doing this today. In terms of the whole industry you're working in, right? And there's so much bad press out there in terms of hospitality, but I'm a big fan of hospitality because I actually believe, and I know it's a tough space, right? But I really believe hospitality has so much relational support to offer. There's so much relationship support available through hospitality. You're interacting with people face to face. There's so much eye contact. It's so interpersonally rich. It is so helpful for people. It is such a supportive area, and it really is. And I think, like, I work in HR career services, but I'm also training as a psychologist, and my area of research interest is the therapeutic benefit of work. And I do think hospitality is really, really helpful in terms of your own well-being, because, you know, we're on Zoom today, unfortunately, but ideally we'd be in front of each other and you'd be getting that reciprocity socially and that sense of support. If you feel that you belong and that you matter and that you're a part of a social connection, it has a fantastic impact in terms of your daily experience of life. And it definitely is a very good industry from that perspective. I'm really happy to come back and talk to the team again if we want to do another session on Zoom, either on this theme or something else in the whole area of suicide prevention. I do have a webinar coming up through my own work. So there's an organization called Trigon, as opposed to LinkedIn. And I think it's Serica, I think her surname is Finucane, who's founded it. But I'm doing a webinar. I'll share the details with Kat on the 28th of July next week. I can't believe it. But it's actually on the therapeutic benefit of work. It's work equals free therapy. Now, I know a lot of people will disagree with me on that, and that's fine. But I'm just making you aware of that as well. Finally, before the Q&A, and critically, I would like everybody to save the Pieta House helpline number in their phone. It's 1-800-247-247. So 1-800-247-247. Pieta House, as I'm sure you're aware, because the group supports so many community initiatives to your corporate social responsibility. Pieta House support people with thoughts of suicide, plans of suicide, and also people who've been bereaved by suicide. They also support people who are self-harming. They are incredible. They're in Cork, and be aware of them in terms of your own well-being and in terms of others. And their service is completely free. I can't recommend them highly enough. So from my perspective, in terms of that section, I'm finished that section now. And I'm really happy now for us to transition now onto a Q&A for you to ask anything you want, either verbally or through the chat function, or indeed my email, which Kat will share with you, is avril@humanreasons.com. If you wanted to contact me at any other point in time, you're so welcome to do so if today isn't the right time for you. Okay, so we'll transition now onto the Q&A.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop recording now.
Okay, thanks, Kat.
Okay.